Do you like candles? We all know that I love candles, and I love the candles from Remy Moon. They are an Australian-based small business and they make the best and most magical candles. All of their candles are made with high vibes, pure intentions, and each one is crafted with a little bit of Reiki healing that also suits the intention of the candle itself. All their candles are non-toxic and vegan, so they don't harm us or the animals. You can use the code SUBURBANWITCH for 15% off all of their products, and it's only for listeners of the Witch Talks podcast. Simply head to remymoon.com.au to get your candles now. Welcome to Witch Talks, the series for spiritual seekers, witches, and enlightened souls. I'm Hannah the Suburban Witch, professional tarot reader, astrologer, and witch, and I hope you're ready to get up close and personal with your favourite witches. Hello, Hannah the Suburban Witch here, and I am delighted to welcome you back to another episode of the Witch Talks podcast. Today I'm going to be chatting with a special guest all about pagan parenting, witchy kids books, and we do chat birth stuff and breastfeeding stuff and all that jazz as well. So heads up, that's the topics of discussion for today. Before we start though, I want to start a new segment on the show at the beginning of each episode, and I want to do like an advice column, like Ask Hannah, Ask a Witch. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but I'm putting it out there that I would like you guys to send me your questions. Now, I don't mean general questions, like general witchy stuff, like what are your favorite books? No, not those. I want specific questions, like, hey, this person's doing X, Y, and Z, or hey, this is the issue that I'm having, or I want to get this, or whatever it is, specific questions, and I will assist you with my witchy advice. Whether that's a specific spell, a direction to look, a reference, whatever it is, I don't know yet, I don't have your questions. Send them over to suburbanwitchery@gmail.com, or if you like, you can send me a voice note over on Instagram. As long as the audio quality is good enough for the episode, I will play it and then I will respond to you. Make sure to pop in your pronouns as well so I don't get them wrong when I'm responding to you, and let me know if you wish to remain anonymous or not. I cannot wait to read all of your questions and to share those responses, because personally, when I listen to other podcasts, people sending questions and they get specific answers, that helps me to learn, and I think it's going to help you guys to learn as well, because one of my goals with this podcast is that you leave every episode knowing something new, learning something new, expanding your knowledge. And honestly, I'm really excited about this season 2. I feel like I've learned a lot doing season 1, and I'm ready to just sort of up it a little bit. I have some great guests lined up, so definitely stay tuned. Remember, episodes come out on the 1st of the month and the 16th of the month every month. Now I'll stop yammering so we can get into the show. In this episode, I'm chatting with the incredible Andrea Stein from Moondust Press. She is a witch, an author, an indie publisher, and hosts her own witchy podcast for kids called Mini Magic. She's joining us via Zoom all the way from Austin. Hey, Andrea, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I should have asked before we started recording, is it Andrea or Andrea?
It's Andrea. You are saying it correctly, but I go by Andy.
Okay, Andy, perfect. I should have asked that as well. But I had that moment in my head as soon as I said your name. I was like, but the character from Lego Friends is Andrea. And I was like, maybe.
Yes, and one of my other authors is Andrea. So we at least have the differentiation, but it gets confusing.
Yeah, I was just like, oh no, Lego Friends has ruined me for pronunciation. Awesome. So, Andrea, I'm very excited to chat with you today. We're going to talk all about pagan parenting and witchy kids books as well, which is going to be awesome. But I want to start out by pulling a tarot card for you, if you're open to that.
Oh, I would love that.
Awesome. Now, do you have a question? Do you want general guidance? What are you thinking?
Yeah. Can I ask anything?
Go for it. Yes.
Okay. I'm in a particularly weird spot with a friend of mine, and have been doing some work around it. So I'm curious about that situation and a resolution of that.
All right, cool. So a resolution and some guidance, I guess. I pulled out a deck before we started, which is the Disney Villains Tarot,
Fun.
because it's fun. And particularly with the theme of today being sort of kid oriented, I think this can be a really fun one as well to pull out because they're
Are
familiar.
your kids into Descendants yet?
Yes, I'm probably more so into Descendants. I love it. It's so much fun. It's so much.
I love it. Yeah. My almost 10-year-old is obsessed with Descendants. All
My
of them.
almost 6-year-old. I think we've been watching it for like the past 3 years, so since she was 3, and she used to love getting up and dancing every time they sang their songs, which the songs are wonderful. If you haven't
All
watched,
of the music, yes, all of the music is so good.
and
I love it.
I can't figure out if I like number 1, 2, or 3 better. They're all good.
I like the third one because I like Cheyenne Jackson, and I think the music in the third one is really good. And just everything that all of those people have gone on to do, like Dove Cameron is Mal, and all of her music is so good. She's adorable. And Sophia Carson is in a bunch of other movies. I love them. I follow them. I feel like their mom.
I have a villains playlist. I'm a very villainous theme today. I have a villains playlist that I listen to just because it feels like it pumps me up. And Dove Cameron's in there. And I Eat Boys Like You for Breakfast. I think that's her song.
I love
and
it.
It's really good. It's really good. So yes, highly recommend those Disney movies. I should watch it again actually, so my son can see it. He's only 2, but I think he's going to be our show dance kid, to be honest.
That's my 2-year-old son, so there's something in there.
It's the best. All right, so let's have a little look. Okay, so resolution with a friend. Let's see what the cards have to help you and guide you today. Now, if anyone wants a closer look at this deck, I do have an unboxing on my YouTube channel as per usual, and I go through them all. And also comment, because I'm a big Disney fan, I comment on what I would have done better, because there's a lot of... All right, let's take a moment to take a breath, Hannah. Just going to ground down. Okay, so we have some 2 cards here. One is basically like this is going to help your situation. This is going to help you come to a resolution. This is what you need to do. And then the other one is what's not going to help. Okay, so because sometimes what happens is if we don't have that balance in, you get like a what we should do or some guidance. Without that, what's not going to help, sometimes that's what people's default is, if you know what I mean. And then they still go and do that and it makes it all messy. So I find it really clear to just be like, do this, don't do this. Hopefully that helps us, okay? So I'm actually going to start with what not to do, okay? Now this one is a card everybody knows, and it does often pop up in situations of conflict as well. So this is our 3 of Swords. If you're watching the YouTube version, you're going to be able to see the card there. There's no actual villain on this one. It's just 3 swords going through a heart. And that was one of my critiques of this deck. Not every card has a villain on it. So when I see this card's ruled by Gemini. Okay, so when I think of, I've said Gemini, I mean Libra, air sign, first three cards, 2s, 3s, and 4s are always going to be Libra in the Swords deck. This one talks of balance and harmony. Now, when we think of Libra specifically, and this card comes through as words and talking, I do actually feel like in this specific example with this friendship, whilst you might want to talk about it or talk through it or say something or have something you want to say, feels like anything like that, even if it's in a way that you think might be harmonious and might help move it through, that actually may not work for this situation, if that makes sense.
That is what's been happening. So that makes sense to me.
Okay. So yes, sometimes our default will be, we've had this issue, we want to talk about it, right? If anyone knows someone who is a Libra, right, that's frequently what they'll do, and then they'll also overthink it. And this one can also come into an overthinking territory, which can sometimes make you really indecisive about how to actually choose an action. So what you do is you engage in conversation to try and figure out if that's going to help clear the air and make a decision happen. And it doesn't always work that way. It almost goes around in circles. Okay. So it's just like this overabundance of that air energy, which is thinking. It is excess communication, excess thinking, all of that sort of thing, which ultimately leads to uncomfortable feelings in our heart space, right? On both ends, okay? Because sometimes as well, when we talk a little too much, there can be words that are unsaid, words that can't be unsaid, words that can be taken the wrong way, even if you don't see it or don't realize it at the same time. So it's always got that opportunity for pain, even if it's not intentional, right? The impact can be different to what we intend. So it's just that step back from trying to just talk it through. So step back, hold those words in. If you need to get the words out, write them a letter, don't send it. Write it for you, okay? You can also do the talking in the shower where you have all the things you want to talk it out, right? Pretending that they're there. That can be a really good way of almost like embodying that energy that wants to come through, but it doesn't have to have that other party there, okay? So that's what's not going to help the situation. So it's interesting if that's sort of already what you've been trying and it's not really bringing that rift back together. So with our card of what's going to help, right? Now, sometimes when you go to a friend for advice, there's typical things that you say and you do for certain situations, like, oh my gosh, you should probably talk about it with them, or that sort of a thing. This is where the tarot cards are wonderful. They're such a wonderful tool because it brings up things that you're like, okay, I probably wouldn't have suggested that. And this is one of those cards, okay? Now, this here is the Six of Wands. And I'll bring it up closely to you. Now, I can't remember her name. She is, the villain that's on this is Madame Mim. But so if you've seen the Sword and the Stone, she goes through like this transformation thing where she pops into different ways of looking. And one of them is this very attractive Madame Mim, right? Honestly, I kind of envy this hair color and style. It's a really cute card. Now, the Six of Wands, generally, when we see that, especially if you know the Rider-Waite-Smith version, it is success, okay? The appearance of success, okay? It is moving forward. You'll usually see in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith one, there is a man on top of this horse and he's going through the clouds. So he's kind of above everyone else and everyone's like, woohoo. There's a wreath, which means success. That's why those symbols in those cards are so important, right? They tell us so much information. And wands, I find out of all of the elements, the fire one, it's a bit more fun. There's a lot more energy there, right? But remember, the Six of Wands comes after the Five of Wands where there's conflict. So this card specifically is telling us you've had that conflict, you've had that awkward, almost like an impasse. If you look at that Five of Wands traditionally, no one can move forward. Everyone's wands are crossed. But we've moved past that. So it needs to be that stepped forward, like, okay, we've done that. We're moving to that next stage. So it's almost a way of just allowing that to have happened and to move forward. And what I would suggest in this, especially because this is when we're looking at Madame Mim, this is the Disney villains, right? We're not using the Rider-Waite-Smith, whilst having that knowledge is really useful when you're using any other tarot deck as well. This is the Disney villains. And what we see here is an illusion, okay? So what is actually going to help is for you to step into that illusion space of almost that let's pretend nothing happened. It's not pretending nothing happened, not really, but in order to move past it, it's like you need to take that step into, okay, let's go into what we want this to be. It's like a quantum leap in a way. When you quantum leap and you step into that, like, I'm just going to go out for dinner with my friend. We both want to be these, like, I don't know, wealthy, fun mums. Let's go and have dinner and pretend that we are what we already want to be. And that'll help us get us there quicker, right? That's that quantum leaping. It's almost doing that with the friendship. Go to where you want to be with it. That resolution will still come, okay? That success will still come there. But I think for them, they need to go to that more comfortable place first, okay? I think that's what's going to really help you there. Might be difficult for you if you're like, I need that other thing figured out, but that's for you to do in the background as well. And they will probably be doing it in the background as well. But I don't think that confrontation and talking about it is actually going to bring you forward. This is what that illusion of almost fake it until you make it.
Yeah, extremely helpful. That card also specifically, it makes me think of like a glamour, right? And glamour magic and like putting on a I'm fine, I'm doing well mask of it, even if that's not necessarily the case.
Yes, exactly. So, and that's where, if you're advising a friend, you're never going to be like, oh, just pretend it's all better, right? That sounds like terrible advice. But situationally, and with some people, that's what needs to happen. That's if you want the resolution. There is a Bluey episode. I'm going to bring up Bluey because we're talking pagan parenting today.
Yeah.
There is a Bluey episode, and it is where they're playing grannies, and Bluey says, "Grannies can't floss," and Bingo says, "Yes,
Oh,
they
I
can."
did it 100 times.
Yes. And she says, "Do you want to be right, or do you want to keep playing?" And I think that I'm getting shivers saying that. I feel like that is kind of where you're at with this relationship.
Yeah. Oh my God. Bluey, my husband and I always say that it's like really a show about parenting.
It is.
Because it's just a show that teaches you how to be a good parent. And I like use so many techniques, like find myself saying things that they say and like slipping into it's crazy. It's the best. Are you guys more crazy about it in Australia than we are? Because it's an
Obsessed.
Australian. Yes.
Obsessed. And I think as well, we're a defense family personally, and the creators of the show were in defense as well. So there are little, like, what do you call them? East. They
Like,
call them Easter.
yeah.
Yeah, little snippets. Like there'll be, a pineapple symbol, which is in defense life. When things happen, you call it getting pineappled. It's meant to be like a pineapple shoved up your rear end because things are not always comfortable. But seeing Bluey and their little pineapple, like that little hint there, you're like, yes, they get it.
I love stuff like that. I always try to put little things like that in books that people will find and pick out of the background.
I love that. So yeah, that's Bluey's wonderful. It's also set in Queensland, which is where we've moved to in the past year. They're in like a traditional Queenslander house, and it just everything feels really relevant to Australian lifestyle, which you don't get in a lot of TV shows, especially ones that make it over in the States as well.
Yeah, I love their house. I want their house so bad. I want Dad's office.
We bought the kids for Christmas. They got a shared gift from us. It was the big gift, and it was the Bluey house, like doll house. They've got little characters. They've got, it's so cute. There's a little fridge and it opens, and like you can buy add-on sets, which are like, they've got the grannies, like Bingo and Bluey dressed up as grannies with the granny car. You can buy everything. It's so cool. It's very cool. Their caravan when they go on their camping trip, and she meets the French kid. Yeah. What's his name? I can't remember. Anyway, love Bluey. Love Bluey.
I could talk about it all day, but we will not.
Yes.
We will move on.
So what I want to know firstly and foremost, because I know obviously what you do at the moment, but were you raised pagan or witchy?
No, not at all. My mother is Roman Catholic and my father is Jewish by ethnicity, but really agnostic. I was baptized Roman Catholic at birth, and then I never really did, like none of my parents went to church or temple. I celebrated Jewish and Christian holidays socially, but I wasn't raised in any type of religion at all. My mom started attending Unitarian Universalist churches when I was probably in middle school, maybe early high school. So I went to a little bit of that with her, but it was still, I felt like a little too God focused for me. But no, I was not at all.
So when did the shift happen for you? When did you fall into this spiritual pathway?
Yeah, I was always interested in occultism and metaphysics, but more in an academic way, I would say. And then when I was 18, I started working as a personal assistant for someone who is a psychic. And I won't call her a witch because she wouldn't call herself a witch. And her practice doesn't look like witchcraft, but it is heavily based in metaphysics. And she has a very strict set of rules and principles that she abides by, that she believes in. And that really opened my perspective for the first time to magic being very real. And at that same time, when I was 18, I was in a very bad relationship with someone, and I ended up getting pregnant, and I had my first daughter when I was 20 years old. So after that happened, things went downhill very, very, very quickly in that relationship that I was already out of, to the point where my daughter was in the NICU. I had a C-section. She was born at 33 weeks. So she was in the hospital for a while. And when she was 10 days old, the first time I left the hospital was to go to the courthouse and file a domestic violence restraining order.
Mm.
And at that point, not exactly that point, but after that, I turned to witchcraft out of necessity. I'll say the practice of witchcraft. I had books on paganism and books on witchcraft, and I had read about a lot of things, and I was interested, but I had never done anything or felt the need or capability to do anything until the point where I really needed to protect myself and my child. So for me, parenting and witchcraft are kind of inextricably linked, because I don't think I would have a practice if I hadn't gone through that situation necessarily and become a parent at that time under those circumstances and needed magic. And I think not for everyone, but often this is the case throughout history, that witchcraft comes up when people need help or when people are in desperate situations that they need to get out of, especially women. And it affords them an agency, and a level of control that they did not previously have.
Mm. That's a rough start to motherhood.
Yes.
Very rough, but I love that you found your magic through it. That's really powerful. And I can see how you're right, it's inextricably tied, and there is a relevance there. What I find, and not all witches are mothers, obviously, and witch is a gender neutral term, all of that, but I do find people that give birth, there seems to be a very high rate of people that come to witchcraft through or from birth.
Yes, I noticed absolutely the same thing. And that a lot of people that buy my books or that buy my books for their kids are new moms who are themselves in the process of fleshing out what their spirituality looks like. I get questions like that all the time. Like, will this be helpful for me as an adult? Or do you have any recommendations for me? I'm just learning too, and I'm going to get my kids this alongside of it. So yeah, I've noticed that too, that I think especially parenthood is very triggering for this kind of spiritual transformation.
Yeah, I'm getting major goosebumps as you were talking about parents coming to you saying, is it helpful for them? Maybe we should be looking potentially, maybe I could write something, a picture book for parents, like a picture book for adults.
I think that illustrated books, I mean, I don't think picture books are just for kids. I think that illustration adds so much depth to your knowledge, so much to be gained, especially with witchcraft, something that can be very visual. There's a lot of, old primary and secondary sources that are pictures, that are things that are helpful to see. I was just explaining to my 9-year-old the other day what a witch's ladder was, and she was having trouble like visualizing it. And I Googled it on my phone, and I pulled up 20 pictures of different witches ladders. You can make it like this with bones, you can make it with feathers, you can make it with beads. Like, these are all examples, these are historical examples, these are drawings. So yeah, having access to the visual part of it by someone who has the knowledge to put it together is really useful.
Yeah, okay, my brain's spinning as it does, which is good. It's interesting. I mean, I personally learn best, when I read the Outlander series, right? I remember turning to my husband and going, why did they not teach history like this in school? I would have remembered so much. I go through it and I'm like, I can tell you when this happened. I know about this political thing now. Like, I would never have grasped that in school the way they taught it, but put it into a story and my brain remembers it, but it can still also distinguish between this is a made up character for the story and this is a political thing that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be, that storytelling is such a useful way to teach. And I mean, I use it in my classes as well, but I also use a lot of images in my classes. I'm showing people, little clips of something, or I'm using pictures to show them what it looks like or how it comes through, because a lot of people need not only the words, but the looking at it as well, the picture to cement it in their mind, as well as a story to tie it all together. So I think it could be super useful. Even like a little mythology book that then has that extra information in the story that's more geared toward adults could be really interesting. So yes, now with your book, so you've got, I think I have all of them that you've written. I've got C is for Coven, which is like an alphabet book, a witchy alphabet book, shall we say. I've got Brina, which is about a little witch. We were actually reading it yesterday. I say we, but my daughter was reading it out loud because she can read now, which is marvelous. And, she loves it. And she even just loves, even in the pictures. So she'll read the bit at the bottom, and then there's a lot of books on the shelf, and she's turning the book upside down and, trying to read all the book names along it.
We had so much fun, like picking out all of the book names and with all of the little details in there.
She came across the word Wicca because it says Wicca on one of them. And she just was like, Witcher? Witcher. Just kept going. I was like, yeah, cool. But yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful book. That was the first one I got from you. We've since got What Witches Wear, and I do have Sunday the Sea Witch, but I've held that back for her birthday, which is in March. We're recording this in February, so in a month's time she's going to have that one. And I think I've already flicked through it. I think she's really, really, really going to love that one, especially because it's got the moving house component. As a defense family, we move quite frequently, so I think that's an amazing one for all the different lessons that brings as well. Have you written, has that all of them? Have I got all of them?
Yes, that's all of mine.
Yes, awesome. And then I've also got another one through your publishing press, which is Casita Brujita. And stunning. We are attempting to be, I was going to say bilingual, but we're actually learning two other languages, so that would make us 3. I'm teaching my kids Spanish, so that sort of a book is marvelous for them to read and for us to put some of these words into more practical settings as well. And there's not many bilingual books. We have a couple. We have Los Pollitos, which is one of the Canticos ones. They're very good, but they're more like baby books.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first sort of like kids picture book that we have that is bilingual and magical and witchy as well. And she's going through it going, we have that, we do this. So it was really great to mix that together. She also made a lot of comparisons with the movie Coco. So that was nice with the ofrenda.
Yes, I get a lot of Encanto comparisons on that
yes.
one.
Another favorite movie over here. And we're on a side note, we're also learning Chinese at my daughter's request over Christmas. She's decided to teach herself Chinese. So I don't know where I'm going to find a Chinese bilingual book. It's going to be hard.
They are out there. I have a local friend who has, I think it's Mandarin.
Yep. We're learning.
It's a Mandarin. It has so it has 3 because it has the Mandarin, I think the word pronunciation, and then it has the characters, and then it has the English. I'll send you her information. Her name is Irene.
Yeah, because we're learning the characters, but I think they're going to come last because it is a totally new world in terms of language. Speaking though, and reading I think they call it Pinyin or something like that. The way it would be phonetically pronounced helps. But yes, it's very different. But she's doing really well teaching herself, which then means I have to learn as well. And now my husband's like, well, I feel left out. And so we're just all learning. And it's his heritage, so it's good.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, so it's fun. So I love that you've included that. So can you tell me a little bit, did your book come first, or did the publishing house come first, which was what started it?
Yeah, I wrote Brina first. I had another job, a full-time job. I was working in sales for a digital marketing company, and I was really extremely, extremely unhappy at that job. And I wrote the book on my lunch break one day, like sitting in a restaurant at lunch. I sat there for like 3 hours and fleshed out the whole thing and I wrote it. Um, and I think I made the Moondust Press Instagram like the next day because I went home and I stayed up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, just reading everything I possibly could on the internet about traditional publishing and self-publishing and all of these things. I figured out that a lot of people create publishing names for themselves to self-publish under. So I just started publishing my own books under Moondust Press for the first probably 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years. And then I realized how many other people, I got contacted all the time asking if I published other people's work. And I was like, I don't, that's really expensive. But I figured out how to do it and I started taking submissions from people. And now I think there are 8 between what's out and what's in process. I think there are 8 other authors besides me.
That's so wonderful. And that's just, when did you took submissions? Was it last year or 2020?
It was May 2021.
2021. Okay. Yeah. So that's been, I guess it's coming up to 2 years then from taking submissions to having those other authors. What's been the most eye-opening part of your journey?
How many people? I mean, I didn't realize, I thought that witchcraft was a much smaller fringe group of people. And I think it's still widely considered that way publicly. I didn't realize how many millions of people out there were not exactly doing the same thing, but had overlapping practices and had this kind of interest. I didn't know when I wrote my first book, I ordered 1,500 copies of it the first print run. And I didn't know if it was going to take me 5 years to sell them. I was shocked when I ran a Kickstarter campaign for my first book and I had like 600 or 700 Instagram followers, not a lot. And like more than 400 people or something ended up backing the Kickstarter. We ended up raising like $24,000 on the Kickstarter. So the whole thing has blown me away by how much it's grown. I was able to quit my full-time job that first year and go full-time on Moondust Press.
So wonderful.
Pay my bills and trying to retire my husband.
That's the dream, isn't it?
Yes. He is a better home parent than I am.
You know what? I'd probably say the same about my husband. He has a service agreement, so we have a time limit. Yeah. So with those books, with the first one, would you say you wrote that for your daughter or for little you?
I wrote it for her. That was my intention. I had been looking for pagan books, witchy books for her. She was 5 at that point. She was in kindergarten. And so I'd been looking for maybe 3 or 4 years for books for her. And there's some things out there, but they were older. They were a little dated. Most of them were self-published. So never, that can be good or bad. Just most of them were self-published. And a lot of them were very Wiccan leaning. Mm-hmm. So I wanted something that was more eclectic. I wanted something that was more folk-based for me and represented my experience and my practice more. And I wrote that first book for her that just kind of was also an explainer that magic is real. This is an option for you. This is what I'm doing. Like, these are what these different things look like. And I didn't really realize I was writing it for little me. I'd say some of the other books have been more for little me. Sunday the Sea Witch is very much a book I wrote for myself, especially about moving. That one's the most for me. But Brina was really for her. And then I wrote C is for Coven when I was pregnant with my son in 2020. So that one was his little baby book.
Yeah, oh, it's wonderful. I remember my daughter was enthralled in C is for Coven. When you get up to, I think E is for Elements, it's got the image of, earth, air, wind, and fire, these little depictions. And she would just sit there, and she must have been, we were in our last house, so I reckon she was maybe 3. And she would just sit there drawing on the whiteboard those images, like over and over and over. They were on her little magnetic board. Like everything she'd draw, she'd just start drawing those. She was just absolutely enthralled with them. And the funny thing is, and I've just only put that together, I was saying yesterday to my husband, she's a little weather witch. Like she doesn't know it, but even from when she was absolutely tiny, she would look up at the sky and go, rain? I'm like, no, it's not raining. And she'd go, rain. And I'm like, it's not going to rain today. That's like a 1% chance or something. And I kid you not, it would rain that day. And from then, any time she has said rain, even now she'll look out and go, it's going to rain today. We just trust it. I go, I will pull the sheets in off the line because she just knows. And I don't think she doesn't understand yet that that's a special skill that she has. So she's definitely got this real attraction to weather, which is really just such a cool thing to see blossoming from such a young age.
Kids are they're so tuned in before they start normalizing themselves all out in middle school.
Yeah. I think she's also had, I guess, the benefit of not being shut down with a lot of the things that she does and says and that sort of a thing, because I've been so mindful of it, because all I remember from my childhood was anything I'd say that I see this or anything, even just imagination, was that's not real. That's not a thing. That's evil. Was anything that was a little bit out there. I was very strict evangelical. So we had picture books, we had picture Bibles. That was what I grew up on. And the books on our bookshelf that were for kids were all about why evolution was wrong and, creationism was real. And that was what I grew up around. And I would read them avidly, and I was very indoctrinated, but I remember reading them avidly, I think wanting more and not getting it. And so I just reread them over and over. I tried to make my cat read the picture Bible because I thought she's going to go to hell. She hasn't read the Bible. It's a poor cat. But I'm just so grateful that we've got books like yours, because I did the search around for ages looking for something, because I was telling my daughter, Mummy's a witch. And she was like, no, witches are bad. And I'm like, no, witches are not bad. And this stereotype was even in someone that was raised by me, who's trying to tell her from the get-go that witches are fine. That's all she saw.
Mm-hmm.
All she saw.
That's a whole other part of it, and the value of breaking that stereotype. And there's 2 of them. There's one, witches are bad, witches are evil, witches are satanic, witches are going to kill children and eat them, whatever. Which is also highly anti-Semitic, but we won't go there. And then there's the second one, which I think my kids see more, which are witches are characters that come out on Halloween, and they wear black capes and they wear black pointy hats and they fly on broomsticks and they point at things and they go poof. And, that kind of fake cartoon magic. So what I've really, even with my own kids, had to work on like breaking is that, and like, how is the magic that you do different than that? And your magic's not real because you can't do that. That's not really witchcraft. So there's a whole slew of stereotypes that I think are getting thrown at kids through movies and TV shows and other books and other kids. And it's really nice to have something, I think, for a lot of parents that breaks that.
Yeah. And normalizes it in a way that it's not this movie magic type of thing where you are pointing at something and it goes poof and changes. I think that's really important. And, little things like the magic that we do at home quite frequently is, let's say my daughter has a nightmare. This happened recently. She's like, I had a nightmare. I don't want to go to sleep because I had a bad dream last night. What if it comes back? So I said, all right, well, we can do something about this. And so I gave her a few options. We could make, a sweet dream potion. She loves making potions and choosing all the ingredients herself. We can get a crystal for under her pillow. We can do a meditation. We can say some affirmations, maybe do some tapping. Like, we've got all these tools in the toolbox that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have this practice as well, which is wonderful. And then I said, we could potentially, and I was sort of going through it, and my husband looked up and he goes, why don't you write it down and burn it? And I was like, good idea, says the man who says he's not a witch. And my daughter was like, fire, yes. I was like, all right, cool. So she wrote on a bit
when they option.
She wrote down, go away, bad dreams. So I just let her, whatever you want to do. And we scrunched it up, and usually I'd put it in the cauldron or something. But no, we just went outside on the pavement. Luckily, it had rained, like it's safe enough to do this. We lit it on fire, and then I said, hey, why don't we hold hands and walk around it saying, go away, bad dreams. So we did that, and we actually got into a bit of a chant. She didn't realize, but we were raising energy. So we're going around and around in an anti-clockwise direction, saying, go away, bad dreams, go away, bad dreams. And it was funny because it was a bit slow to start burning. And as soon as we started chanting, it just went, and it was big. And then as soon as we went, go away, bad dreams, and stopped, I swear the fire just went out, just instantly. And I was like, even for me as an adult, which that was cool. And she saw it. She was like, Mum, we did it. I was like, we did it. We absolutely did it. And the little witch that she was literally just in her undies because it's so hot here at night. So I'm like, she's pretty much doing like naked dances under the moon at the age of 5.
I love it. I still get those moments, like when I get a moment of confirmation like that. It still gives me goosebumps. It's still, I'm like, oh shit, like I'm really doing something. So yeah, I love
very cool. It's so cool. And she went to bed, and of course she didn't have a nightmare. She hasn't actually had a nightmare since we did that. So it's really powerful because it gives this visual representation as well of something that you can do. It makes it kind of fun. It's a way of embodying, what you want to achieve and just changing the world one little tiny piece of paper on fire at a time, And I think if she hadn't had all of these, wonderful stories that I'm showing her in an example as well, that might have looked scary to her, but instead it looked fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really powerful. Have you noticed a barrier, I think, because this is sort of the other side, like I want this stereotype to change, but I've noticed another stereotype. I'm interested if you have. Have you noticed a barrier in parents buying these books for their kids?
Not necessarily, because if a parent, I would say most of the parents that I interact with are already in this space. There are some people, there's 2 types of negative feedback that I get, right, it's satanic, it's bad, you shouldn't share that with kids. But then there are people that just say, I'm a witch or I'm pagan, and I don't think you should share any of this with kids at all. I don't think kids should be exposed to this. I think kids should not be exposed to any religion, any spirituality whatsoever, and that they should make all of their decisions when they grow up and are adults. The question I come to is, how are they supposed to make a decision if they don't know what their options are? And if you're raised your whole life believing that magic's not real, it's harder as an adult to believe that. So even planting that seed, which is not just true in paganism, is true in so many religions, is true in Judaism, is true in folk Catholicism, that magic is real. Just allowing them to know that as children, I think, is half of the battle, and getting them to accept that and carry that through childhood and not get that stamped out.
Yeah. I would love to know if the people that have issues with this being exposed to children are also saying that about other religions being exposed to children at such a young age.
Some of them are, and I think a lot of it comes from religious trauma. I think those are not always, I don't know, but I think those are people that maybe have been raised in homes that are more evangelical, and they associate any sharing of religion or spirituality with children with, this is what's happening. That's what happened to me. That's indoctrination. You have a choice. When in reality, most of the pagan parents that I know are not just buying pagan books for their kids, they're introducing their kids to a whole host of things because they're generally very open-minded.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the same. Like I have my fair share of religious trauma, absolutely. And I do have opinions on things like the idea of hell being very traumatic and damaging for a child, which is, you know, when I'm talking this sort of stuff like spirituality, paganism, all of that with my daughter, there are some topics that you probably wouldn't put in a kid's book, right?
Absolutely.
But
a lot of them. Yes.
Yeah, but the kids' Christian Bibles have very, you know, oh, we're just going to rip a baby in half and give half of you. Like, that's not a children's story. Throw someone in a lion's den. Like, no, we're in a fire. Like, if you don't do as you're told, you know, you get thrown in the fire.
Violent at some points. And my oldest daughter at one point a few years ago asked for a children's Bible. We live in Texas, you know,
plenty of those around.
It's all around, and it's all around her socially. So she was curious. She wanted to read the Bible. She wanted to know what was going on. She was like, who is this guy? So I got her, we checked out a children's Bible. You know, I think it would be hypocritical of me to not let her read the Bible. And I think if she wanted to practice that way, it would be hypocritical of me to not allow that and not accept that, because the whole point and the whole thing I'm trying to instill in my kids is you can choose whatever you want. I chose this. I'm not sure if it's correct. I think so. You know, that's why I'm doing it, but nobody really knows. So just do whatever you think is right.
Yeah, I love that. It's what I strive to do as well. My daughter has a lot of questions, as all kids do, but her main one, which she started when she was like 2 or 3, and I was like, surely not. She would ask, Mum, where do the trees come from? And I was like, oh, got this. Trees come from seeds. She was like, okay, where do the seeds come from? And I was like, from the trees. We got this. And she was like, what about the first tree? I'm like, So we sat down. Now, remember, I was taught that evolution was bad. My high school didn't teach evolution. It taught creationism. So I don't have any of that knowledge. So when I met my husband, he was raised semi-Catholic, I would say, but he's very scientifically minded. When we started dating, he would laugh at me and the things that I would say. And I didn't like that. So I went and took a Khan Academy course on evolution to teach myself. I was like 21. I was like, fine, I'm going to figure out what you're talking about. And I did. I taught myself and expanded my mind and read, you know, a lot of different books. So I sat down with my daughter. I said, okay, I'm going to teach you what I know. And then I'm also going to teach you what I was taught, which some people believe. And I'm going to teach you what some of the other religions believe as well. So we went through, we had a whiteboard. I was drawing pictures of evolution, you know, from this to this to this to this. And then I did, you know, and creationism believes that there's someone out here and they do this and this happened here. And then this religion teaches this. And so she had this little diagram of each one. And I thought, oh, killing this mum thing. This is great. And she just kind of went, well, which one's right? And I was like, no one knows. No one. You have to decide that for yourself, which one you want to believe in. And she was like, oh, this is boring, and walked away. And I'm like, oh, that was a lot of effort. But obviously, but that question comes up frequently. And I said, remember what we did? We talked about this, this, this. And we go over those same things. She's got the foundation. We go over it again and again and again. And she's asked before, can I go to church? Like, absolutely. If you want to go, I will suck it up and I will take you with me. And I will support you if that's what you want to do. Absolutely. As long as whatever you choose is not harming other people and is done with kindness. Totally fine. She's then turned around and said, nah, it sounds boring. I'm like, yeah.
that's one of the big questions that comes up for kids. Creation. How did we get here? What am I doing here? And then the other one that I get a lot from my kids is, what's going to happen when I die? Where do I go? My daughter very firmly believes in reincarnation. I haven't sorted out all of my feelings about that personally, but she has, which is good for her.
Love that.
But that's a big one that we talk about too, where it's helpful to take a more spiritual view sometimes, because I want to tell her, well, it depends on how good a person you are. And
yeah, I wanted to. My daughter came up with, what did she say? I posted it on my Facebook page, because she said one of those things that you kind of go, oh, okay, and it was just out of the blue, and then she kind of just left it and walked away, and it was very much reincarnation vibes. And I haven't really taught her. I haven't taught her that. I haven't said that that's what happens at all. I believe in reincarnation and past lives and all of that, but we haven't really got to that. When we talk about death, we've had some major deaths in the family in the past year. And every time I talk about that, she, and, you know, her grandmother, which was a few years prior, she knows that they're in spirit and that she can talk to them whenever she wants. She hasn't really asked too much about that since then. I'm trying to find, because I posted it up here and it's really good, because I did it literally how she said it, but it was a little while ago. So let's see if I can find it as I quickly scroll.
I have one too. When Luna was maybe 2.5, she was about to turn 3, because we were talking about how it was going to be her birthday. And I was telling her, it's your birthday, you're going to be 3. And she kept saying, why? Like, why am I going to be 3? And I said, because that's how long you've been on the earth. And she was like, but why? And I said, because you were born, and then there was 1 year, 2 years, and then it's going to be 3 years. And I kept repeating just like the same sentence in different ways. And finally she just goes, but what about last time? She's 2.5. And I was like, I don't know about time. I'm so sorry.
So I found the thing. So it said, it was in December, she said it. So it was a couple of months ago. So I've written, my 5-year-old daughter just popped out with this. Her, when I was a baby, before I was in your tummy, I was an old lady. I was 113. And I was like, is that so? Probably the tone I used as well. And she said, yep, we actually grow down. And I was like, grow down?
Oh my God.
And she goes, yep, once we get old enough, we grow down to a baby to start again. And I was like, that's very interesting. And I never want to like egg it on, if you know what I mean, because you don't want to be like, oh, okay, so then tell me, because you want it to come out exactly as it comes out. And then I could scribble it down somewhere to be like, when you were a kid, you used to say stuff like this. But I don't want it to be, I want to know as well that I'm not leading her into these things, because that helps for my own confirmation as well as everything else. But growing down, I was like, that's fascinating.
That's an amazing way of putting it. And I do the same thing where I kind of not play dumb, but keep my responses very minimal to see what I pull out of them on their own.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I want to go back to the question about the barriers there, because I feel like I definitely had something, and I know other people may have as well. With buying these, buying witchy books, I remember the first time when I went to buy Brina, I felt resistance. There was me being like, I'm literally a professional witch on the internet. Why am I feeling resistance in this? What is it? And obviously religious trauma is there in the background. And I had to really remind myself, like, people do this when they have a religion or a spiritual practice, they raise their kids in it. That is normal. And I think it was what you were talking about before, that resistance to influencing them or telling them what they should believe as well. And I remember I had to really like sit myself down and be like, it's okay to have this book here. And if she doesn't like it, she doesn't like it. But, you know, it's right next to some other wonderful books that I wish that I had when I was a kid. We've got one really good one called Prince and Knight. And it's a little...
Oh, I love that.
love story between a prince and a knight, right? So things like this that just give them those opportunities to see that there's more than just, you know, the princess and the prince, or more than just when I grow up, I want to be a princess. You know, when I grow up, maybe I want to be a witch. Maybe there's that other option. And I think we did get, you know, years back with Wizard of Oz, that was the first time a good witch had ever been, you know, Glenda the Good Witch. That was the first time ever in pop culture there'd been the other option of being a good witch. And I think now we're seeing more of that nuance. It's not just good and bad. There is just witch, which I think is really, really important. So even for me, I felt resistance. And I've had a lot of my followers questions as well been around, is it okay to do this? Is it, you know, should I be buying books like this? And I'm like, absolutely, hell yeah, because now I've bought them and seen how wonderful it's been for the kids to have these options. So yeah, I think some of that barrier or resistance in parents might even just be that it's just new. It's something they didn't grow up with. So it's new for them. Yeah. I think it's good. You're breaking ground in that area.
So long as we're not giving them these books and saying, these are the only books you have access to, this is what you have to follow, this is what we do, this is correct, then there's no harm in sharing it in a wider way.
Is breastfeeding going well for you, by the way?
Yeah, she's been my easiest by far.
That's good. Yeah. Breastfeeding's tough. I want a third. There is a third. I know there's a third. I know, but there's a lot of hesitancy with my son's just had like a handful of nights sleeping through after 2 years. So my husband's like, I can't go back in the trenches.
I know. I feel like I have one more baby around, and I've had a lot of people tell me that I have one more baby around me, but we're done. We won't fit in the house or the car, or yeah, I can't up again. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm in that, like, I want another child. I want to be pregnant again. I miss being pregnant. I kind of miss the baby, like first 3 months. And then I want to skip to 2 years. Cut out that middle bit. And I know it feels really long when you're in it, but I'm already seeing that, like, my son's 2 and I'm like, oh, wait, this is happening too fast. Wait a minute. We're all growing up. But then I have really, like, when they're all big, it's going to be beautiful. I'm like, oh, I feel so pulled. Like, I want to, but.
I know. I'm like, yeah, I'm 4.5 years off from them all being in school. And I'm like having my days back and my time back, and I'll be
ends it all, doesn't
only
it?
5. I'm like, I'll have my life. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I've had multiple people tell me that they think there's another one. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel another one for me as well. So yeah, how has it been going from 2 to 3?
Much, much more difficult. I have a 7-year age gap because, I had my daughter when I was 20, and then I was a single mom I got married when she was 5. So I was a single mom for 5 years, and then I got married and I had Leo when she was 7, and then I just had Georgia. So there's a 7-year age gap between my first 2. She was totally independent, self-sufficient, and helpful, and in school, and all things. And then I gave myself a 2-year age gap, and it is heinous. Yeah. I don't have to put to it. It's so incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I wanted a 2-year age gap, but now that he's 2, I'm like, I am thankful that I didn't do that, because we had a 4-year age gap with them, and that actually worked quite well, I think.
Yeah, I would not advocate for a 2-year age gap to anyone listening. It's very difficult, but it's gotten a lot better, right? We're 7 months in tomorrow or the next day. So it's much, much easier now than it was at the beginning. But I also have a tough 2-year-old, and he has a hard time with transitions. And this is the big transition that has ever happened.
Yeah, definitely. Whilst we're talking about parenting as well, like motherhood, so you had a home birth with Georgia. Did you have a home birth with Leo as well?
Yes, they were both at home.
That's so wonderful. Do you think your spiritual practice played a part in that decision?
Not necessarily. I tried to plan a more natural, not a home birth, but a drug-free birth with Luna, and then had her at 33 weeks via emergency section. So I watched The Business of Being Born, the documentary, in a college course, and was just obsessed with like home birth and natural birth and the cascade of interventions before I ever even got pregnant. So I think I always knew that that was the way for me. I did, when I was pregnant with Leo, very intentionally use our local Austin Witches Circle. We have a Facebook group of a few thousand people to find my doula, who was a witch, who is now one of my good friends. And then I ended up having him, I had him at 35 weeks at home. And it happened so quickly that my midwife and doula were on speakerphone, driving house urgently, and they did not make it. So it was just us.
Yeah.
Luna midwifed me. My doula was like screaming to her over the phone, like, go get scissors, go get towels, like all the things.
That is beautiful though.
It was amazing. I wouldn't do it any other way. But then Georgie, we went the latest. She was 38 weeks. So that was a little more chill. We got to stay home. My midwife made it in time, 20 minutes before. I think she was at my house for a total of like an hour and a half. They're quick.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I have the opposite. I cook them long. My son was 42 weeks on the dot.
Ooh.
And we planned a home birth, and mine are not quick. Not long either, not too long. I think my labour with him started about 4 a.m. after 3 weeks of what's it called? Prodromal labor.
Yeah.
Kind of like
9 days. Georgia. Oh my God. 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Yeah.
Oh.
I had 6 days with my daughter, and I thought that was bad, and I ended up going for an induction. But I also had never really heard of a home birth before. It was totally outside of my knowledge. And then with my second, one of the girls in my mother's group from my first birth, she'd had a home birth, and I was like, what? That's an option? And so we went down that path, but it just, I know I know the steps, because there's so many things. It's such a, delicate balance, I think. I know the things that put me off, but I ended up getting very, very, I need help. So we transferred for some pain relief, and I had him the moment they transferred me from the ambulance bed to the hospital bed, and he popped out. So I didn't even get the pain relief. I was like, no, I could have done it at home.
Yeah, but also there's something to that, in that your body didn't feel safe at home. You didn't feel like you could release him at home, right? That wasn't the place.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, that wasn't the place.
And we were only 2 minutes from the hospital, which was easy. But he did come out on call, so my waters never broke.
Oh.
So the reason it was probably so difficult is there was no water to lubricate everything. And I didn't just push out a 3.6 kilo baby, which is 7.5 pounds, I think, maybe close to 8 pounds. I didn't just push him out. I also pushed all the water in the sack. So
I love those videos. Those are my favorite videos to watch.
We didn't get a photo, we didn't get a video, because it happened so fast. But when I saw him, because the midwives, they actually said they've never seen that. I think it's 1 in 80,000 births. They'd never seen it. And of course, in a hospital, they would always break your waters if it hadn't happened. Yeah. And they were very confused, because what happened is almost like the sack and the bubble of waters was coming out first, and his dark hair was swimming in this sort of bubble section, right? So it was moving.
What are we looking at?
They said they actually had no idea. Their brains were like, is that worms? What is that? And obviously he then came straight out. They just kind of had to roll with it and realized that it was the whole sack, and they had to break it because he had the cord around his neck. Pulled that off. And when I looked down, I could just see the sack, the membrane over his face. And I pulled it off and I said, is that the sack? And they said, yeah, he was born in it, because I didn't realize yet. And immediately I was like, he's going to have the second sight. Like, I just know that. That's the spiritual, wives' tale is what they say. And as I was cutting the cord, and then they handed him up to me, and I looked at my husband, and he's, like, whoa, what just happened? And I've looked up and said, find out his rising sign. He's like, what? I'm like, run his chart right now.
First thing when Leo and Georgia were born, I did their charts within half an hour of both of them being born. Did their charts myself.
Yep. I think the cord had barely just been cut, and he's like, no, right now. It's like, right now, man, cleaning me up.
I need to know.
I was like, I'm telling you right now, I'm looking at him. I just took one look in his eyes. And I said, he is a rising Cancer. I'll put so much money on it, but I need to know that I'm right. And so he's like, what do I do? And I was like, go to this website. So I'm like guiding him through it, and he put it all in. And of course I'm yelling at them, you got the birth time right? Please tell me you got the birth time. And they put it in, he's a rising Cancer. I was like, I knew it. I can relax now.
So yeah, that's so cool. Moms know.
Birth is just wonderful. So yeah, if/when I have another, I've already found my future doula, and I've got her booked in to come on the show as well and chat with me, Dr. Danielle, because she's a doctor, a GP, but also a doula and also a witch, and she's Indigenous. She's wonderful. So I think that whole experience will be very different now.
Such a portal, for lack of a better word, and having, when there's time for it, having more of a spiritual bent to it is really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to as well, so we've sort of gone off onto birth, which is fine, going back to the work that you do with Moondust Press. So you've got firstly two things that I think are really wonderful. Not only are you breaking the stereotype of the witch through children's books, but you're also breaking the stereotypical images that we see in children's book. And I think What Witches Wear was really, really amazing for that in the imagery and the wording as well and everything. And if anyone hasn't read that book, so it goes through, it's like a color book. So it's like some witches wear, red and blue and green, blah, 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 blah. But each one has a, I can't bring it into my mind. You're probably better at some of the actual words, but we've got a witch there that's in a wheelchair, and it's so cool because the wheelchair wheels are like a cobweb. They look really cute. And then we have male witches. We have non-binary witches, and we have witches of color, and we have witches of different sizes and different abilities, all represented. And I think that is crucial. Obviously that's intentional for you. Is that something that you're going to make sure that all of the books include that sort of a thing going forward?
Yeah, that was absolutely intentional with What Witches Wear. That's kind of the whole point of the book, right? That a witch doesn't always, first of all, look like a woman, like a thin young woman or an old woman with a big nose and warts, that all of these different people from different walks of life can all be witches. We do try to be intentional with including diversity in books. There are cases where if I'm working with both a white author and a white artist, try to be more careful about the images because I want everything to be authentic. Like with Brina, we're working on the second edition of Brina right now. She's a Black character, and we are adding a bunch of pages in, and I'm working with a really amazing cultural consultant. We've been working on it for so long because I have so many other things in the works, but a really amazing Black woman, her name is Taylor Huntley, to add in like voodoo and hoodoo and Santeria. We added a brujeria page, and there's just a page on like cultural appropriation and research, and not using those words, but like learning from blogs and books and being respectful when you learn things and where you pick things up from. So
yes, I absolutely would love to have more books that represent different practices, different people, different walks of life. But it's also important for me that those books come from those particular communities now.
Super important. And I love that you're doing that. And I think it sets a wonderful example as well. I'm really big on especially supporting the publishers and the press, houses that do that, because there has been such a gap for so long. Just if anyone's looking as well, even for adult books, someone that does that really well is Row House Press, yep, and Spirit Bound Press. Both of those doing really well in diversity, inclusion, and just changing the way publishing works as well.
Yeah.
Which,
Traditional publishing is very old and antiquated, and it runs on a lot of very old systems and practices. And it's fun in indie publishing to have the flexibility to kind of do whatever you want and make whatever kind of deals you want and take a chance on books and people that might not have gotten the opportunity to do things otherwise. Because traditional publishing is such a nepotism game. It is so, oh, you're this person's husband. Oh, your brother works in this company, or your friend from here. And I think people don't realize that so much of it is who you know already. And that influences a lot of what books get published, not necessarily so much in the occult space. In the occult space, though, is how many followers do you have? How well can you market this book now? So I don't know. I like to take a chance on people that also don't have much of a social media following barely. I'm trying to mix it because I have some people who do have really big followings and the ability to market their own books. And then there are people, I'm working on this really, really cool book about there's this concept in the Philippines called a suhi birth, which is like a breech birth in the Philippines. And when children are born breech in the Philippines, they have specific magical abilities to within this tradition called like hilat, which is like touch, like healing with touch. And Kristen, the author, her father was born in the Philippines, and he was born breech in the Philippines a very long time ago. And he had a lot of these experiences in his childhood. So it's his true story that she has written. And she wouldn't call herself a witch. It's a book that is about magic, and it's a folk tale. But she's not, a part of the witchcraft community in any way. And I think being able to take stories like that might not necessarily have been heard otherwise and expose them to the larger magical community is really fun and important.
Absolutely. And I think as well, just talking about especially home birth or free birth community. And if anyone's wondering as well, Andrea is amazingly multitasking right now and feeding Georgia, which is absolute super mum vibes. Love it. With breech births, they are rarely seen in they pretty much don't let you do it in the hospital, but they can let you, it's not about letting you. They don't inform you that it's a possible way to birth vaginally. There's a lot of fear around it. And even myself, I've had to relearn what is normal and physiological and all of that in birth through those home birth and free birth spaces, because it's just so against what we're often taught in around birth is this medical experience. And I do think there are times where things like being born in the sack, which now is 1 in 80,000, whereas I'm sure, and there's so many these spiritual ties to that, which we don't have so much anymore because so many people have their waters broken or induced and that sort of a thing. And
I thought when you said that the nurses said that they'd never seen that before, like that's such a statement on the medicalization of birth, that they had never seen this thing that, it's uncommon, but it's not crazy unheard of for people that are around birth all day, every day, working in a hospital, watching people give birth.
Yeah.
So those types of things that people just don't get to see anymore.
Yep. And these footling breaches or just breech births in general, like I feel like I've watched so many breech birth videos now. And it's beautiful and it's amazing, and it's still possible, right? So I think it's wonderful to hear that there are these spiritual associations with that as well, right? And I think the fear that was given to me growing up was that birth is dangerous, that women used to die all the time from giving birth, because we didn't have doctors and hospitals like we do now. And knowing more now, I'm like, usually it was if they got an infection afterwards, right? So it didn't happen in birth, it was afterwards. And just knowing that helped to change a lot of my mind, because evolutionarily speaking, if the species that gives birth then passes away, that doesn't really work for evolution, right? Doesn't really make sense. So I think there's always this fear around what women do, anything that is powerful. And as you said, it's a portal. There's a lot of, I say women, I mean women and people who birth. It can be a portal space, and it's not just for the people birthing as well. We see changes in everyone that's there and witnesses it as well. There is power there, and I think that's often what gets taken away. And I think this birth wound, I'm going to call it, also feeds into this witch wound, and the fact that midwives were then taken away historically as witches, and we lost that knowledge and it got medicalized, and that power got given back to the patriarchy, all of that. It is intertwined. There's something there, right? And I think it's really interesting to watch these changes that are coming through now, not only in witchcraft as a growing community, but home birth growing, and all of these things. I think they are really much linked. It's really interesting.
I think so too. I think we're seeing such a rise in the United States, paganism, neo-paganism, Wicca, witchcraft. It's the fastest growing religious group by percentage in the United States. So I think there are an estimated like 3 million people in the United States right now that are practicing witchcraft in some form. And it's growing so much every day. It's like a Renaissance period, right? We're in like a new age of Aquarius. And I use that very loosely. I don't. But people are really coming back to this. And so many people are realizing that this is possible, realizing that when they've been saying, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, or I just go with what the universe, they're starting to dig deeper and realize that maybe there are earth-based religions that align with that.
I used those particular things. I'm not religious, I'm just spiritual. And also, I'm just, the universe. Like those were my lines 10, 15 years ago. Once I got kicked out of the church and everything crumbled, that was, I don't know. I believe there's something there. I'm not atheist. I know I'm not atheist, but there's something there. And yeah, it's funny because it's that like pathway to figuring out that there's a little more than what you expect, especially if you don't know. I didn't know any of this stuff was there as a choice, right? So it's interesting. And I had an interview way back, episode 5 of season 1 with Mortalis, and we talked about pagan funeral rites. And Mortalis wrote a book literally, about pagan funeral rites, because they said this is one of the most, as you said, fastest growing religions, but every single funeral rite is written for Christians. And if there is any deviance in when they're teaching at mortuary school, the only deviance from that is, sometimes you might have someone who is Islamic or someone who is Jewish, and they're still tied in with those Abrahamic religions, and there's no nuance outside of that. So they've written that book for people that want something different in terms of their, passing rites, their funeral rites, their death rites, which again is another portal that we go through. So, and in the birth space, I'm noticing there's it's very strange. The birth community is either I should say home birth and free birth community and wild pregnancy area, which I'm just interested in, I just sort of float in the background. There's either very hardcore evangelical, religious, Christian people that do this, or very spiritual and witchy or pagan or hippie new age. Like there's not really a lot of middle ground. It's kind of one or the other. It's like this weird one thing that we can agree on, but often for different reasons. So it's an interesting area. Obviously lots of disagreements happen as well because of.
Yes, I have noticed the exact same thing.
Yeah. So it's an interesting world. But I love what you're doing with Moondust Press. I love every single book that I've got of yours has been wonderful. I do have actually on the YouTube channel, if anyone wants to listen, I do a read through of Brina and C is for Coven. And I believe you've said that it's okay for me to do with What Witches Wear.
Oh yeah, please do. Meaning to get read alouds up on YouTube of me doing it forever. And it's just one of the things on my list of 500 things.
Well, I can do that. So leave that with me. If you're all right with Casita Brujita, I will attempt with my Spanish. My Spanish is not the best, but at least the English part will be perfect.
Yeah, you are more than welcome to read any of them.
Which is great. And as an indie publisher, you're able to, like, that's possible. Whereas any other children's book that I would get from a traditional publisher, there's no way I'd be allowed to read it on.
Yes, I do. People do all the time. And I'm always like, you don't have the ability to do that. I see it on TikTok a lot. People read full children's books and I'm like, oh, I am a one-person operation. So you only need my permission.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, so Andrea, firstly, thank you so much for joining us, even though it's your Sunday night and you've got your lovely children there as well. I really, really, really appreciate it. And
I'm sorry.
Do not apologize at all. At all. I get it. I'm a mum and it's my own podcast. It can be whatever it wants. So with your books and everything, if anyone wants to buy them, where is the best place for them to buy?
Yeah, moondustpress.com if you are in the United States. If you are in Australia, we're stocked through the Little Potion Co. I know that international shipping gets crazy expensive. So very happy to have an Australian stockist now for all of our books. We love them.
That is wonderful to know, especially because, I did the Kickstarter for I think it was for Casita Brujita, and then I got the extra books as add-ons because I was like, that saves on shipping.
Yeah.
But yes, that's really good to know. Little Potion Co. Awesome. And as well, anyone who has read them, if you have an Amazon account and are able to leave a review, that is the best way to help authors and publishers as well. So please.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Andrea. I'll pop all those links in the description box below. Don't forget to leave us a review for the Witch Talks podcast over on Apple Podcasts, or you can leave a 5-star rating on Spotify. And if you want access to uncut or behind the scenes episodes, you can sign up as a Patreon and get to see all of the behind the scenes goodies. And of course, if you want to book in with me or get any of my services, head on over to suburbanwitchery.com. You can find everything there. Thank you so much, and I'll chat to everyone in the future on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks for having me.